country, everything.
Yeah, great. Thank you again. And yeah, our meeting in Brussels seems like a lifetime ago. And when I was actually first approached to speak at the Investment Migration Council Forum, I was like, are you sure? Like, do you know what we do? But then when you sort of delve into it, it's just a matter of migrants experiencing challenges. And that happens all over the world in all different aspects. So I guess it made sense. So I'm very glad that I went and met you. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for your support. In terms of how it works, basically ours is a model that is employer-led. So there are things like skills partnerships around the world, and we look at where candidates are and what they do, and then we bring them to countries. Those are programs that exist. Our model is really about like international talent recruitment. So what we do is we let employers know that we exist. That's often through programs like this, through campaigns for certain industries, a lot of word of mouth, or government support. And basically, an employer will approach us, or we will approach an employer and say, there's an untapped pool of talent. Do you have any vacancies? The employers will then suggest, I guess, their interest or indicate their interest. We then go through what is required for displaced talent mobility at the outset. So it's really important to manage expectations, given that candidates, this is a huge choice for candidates, and very often the search for a durable solution, can take up an entire lifetime if you're in displacement. So basically, we brief employers on what's required from an employment perspective, an immigration perspective, an integration perspective. And if they're willing to go forward, employers will give us a position description for the job that they're looking for that is in shortage. We will then go to the talent catalogue with our wonderful colleagues in Lebanon and Jordan and partners around the world to find candidates that fit that job description. We then send that shortlist, and it is like an international recruitment. Candidates go through a competitive recruitment process. Often it's remote. Sometimes it has been in person. We've recently had a trip to Lebanon with an employer to hire some candidates. But we sort of prepare both the employer and the candidates to partake in that process. If and when the job offer is made, we then go through an immigration process. Now, the immigration process is a vital one because a lot of our work is making sure that the immigration process is equitable and has concessions that are in place for displaced talent. So that really, for this to work, we do a lot of government work in advance and get sort of support from governments to test different concessions and make sure that programs are accessible. But we do that only for skilled migration pathways. It's how we find this program sustainable. It's how we make sure that it doesn't take spots of vulnerable refugees. And it's how we know that employers know to interact with an immigration system. So the candidate will go through the skilled migration program. Once their visa is secured, we then go through relocation. We often do that with partners like the IOM, so the UN Migration Agency, who support in moving the candidates. And then it's all about the integration, orientating the candidates in their new community, connecting them with community groups, connecting them with other people who have come through the program, and just making sure that they have what they need to set up a meaningful life in their destination country. So our support lasts for 12 months after the placement. But very often we find that we're not needed that much. After a few months, candidates forget to tell us that they've had a baby, or that they've brought their partners to the country, or that they've got married, which is a nice thing. That's the mode of us disappearing. But it's also so wonderful that when problems do persist, we're able to track them and troubleshoot them for future candidates coming through. So end to end, it is an employer-led program that is international recruitment at its heart, but at the end of it has that hybrid model of making sure that candidates integrated, which often goes above and beyond what you would sort of do for an intra-company transfer of an employee.
Wow, fantastic. And there's also so much kind of aligned what we are seeing in terms of international migration, not necessarily obviously with displacement, but we see a lot of or a consistent trend in Europe at least of digital nomads, for instance, which obviously the circumstances are different, but the pool and the idea and the essence it is the same, and there's a lot of anxiety around making the move and the family and where I'm gonna, all of those things. And it's fantastic to have people like you in their corner. And so, well done, nice one.
Yeah, no, it's good, and we have learned things that I don't think that you'd ever predict. How difficult it is to get a bank account if you've got a Syrian passport, for example, or how important pomegranate molasses is in cooking, and how important food and cooking is to feeling like home. Or so it's a remarkable sort of social understanding of migration, because as an immigration lawyer or someone working in immigration, your journey sort of ends when someone gets a visa. But at TBB we really work on the end to end, and you're sort of with people in a real important curve of their life. So we get as much from the candidates as they probably do from us. It's a really enriching experience, and that's what we really say to employers. You can be driven by feeling a skill shortage. That's what the program is about. But what you get out of it in terms of the human capital, the diversity of opinions and cultures that you bring in through this program is really something that's quite intangible but is remarkable.
Yeah, it sounds very gratifying.
I mean, it sounds like a massive logistical work as well to move someone from one part of the world to the other part of the world. And then I think for our viewers to understand, or even for me, because I'm still learning about talent beyond boundaries, if you could give us an example, obviously without mentioning names, not mentioning names of employees or of employers, but an example of how you placed a specific talent from one specific country to another one, how it all worked. Do you have time? Do you have an example to give to us?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the most recent sort of placement. So we've done huge cohorts. So for the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, we've moved 47 people in one go.
Wow.
And a lot of them were graduate nurses or nurses who have qualifications but don't have permission to work, nurses who were working illegally to keep up their skills, and then they moved to the UK to start as healthcare assistants, but a lot of them have now registered to work at full capacity with a number of months. One has become a matron of the ward in which he works. It's remarkable. So we have like those large-scale programs, and our next one is for 70 nurses to arrive in March. So that program is kicking off in the next few weeks. In terms of an individual case, we had someone named Deborah Meaden, who is, I don't know if you know, there's a show called Dragon's Den in the UK where people pitch to investors for a business idea.
Yeah.
So Deborah Meaden is a successful businesswoman in the UK. She's a judge on that show, and she found out about Talent Beyond Boundaries and tweeted about us. And out of that, an employer came to us and said, hey, can we have a chat? They're a London-based graphic design company, and they were really struggling to find someone who could do both 3D animation and 2D animation, because they were like, in the UK, you can often find one or the other, but not both. And so we were like, let's see what we've got on the talent catalogue. We put some incredible talent to them, and they shortlisted 4 candidates. They interviewed them. They were ready to give one offer. But then this is where the cultural element is really important. A lot of their products are alcohol related, and for cultural and religious reasons, the candidate was not comfortable working with those products because chooses not to drink, and because of that can't really immerse themselves in the brand. So we moved on to another candidate, and they found a candidate who has both 3D and 2D experience. So he's a Syrian refugee in Jordan. Young guy, he had to leave Syria. His whole family's back in Syria. So he'd been like making his way and making his life in Jordan, but was never given any social rights, and so this was a real chance for him. He went through the recruitment process, showed his portfolio, and the employers were just blown away by him, gave him an offer. They actually had to become sponsors. They'd never been through an immigration process before. So they went through that whole process. They sponsored him. And then, they worked out how to welcome him and actually bring him to the UK. My colleague Holly and I were actually in Amman in Jordan 2 days before he was to move to the UK. And we had coffee with him, and he told us that he had not told his family that he was moving to the UK because he still thought it was a dream. Like, he was like, I don't believe it until I get there, and I'm not going to raise anyone's hopes. So he got to the UK. He called his family at the airport, and it was like a very emotional scene. And yeah, now he works in as a 3D and 2D animator. He's going to do some pro bono work for the UK to help other candidates coming through so they know what to expect in the journey. And the employer is so incredibly happy and proud, and the entire firm has just gone above and beyond in terms of the support they've given both the candidate and this program. So, yeah.
Wow, what a story. It was also a learning curve for the company.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess each country, each type of industry is also a learning curve for you all the time, right? I think it would be very helpful to understand some of the most kind of across the board, like, challenges in the process, but also you just mentioned that this company had to sponsor this particular candidate. So is it usually how it works? The government facilitates, but the companies also. Would you mind us giving a little bit of a taste? I know it probably changes, but it'd just be good to see, or you can find a bit of a common thread.
Yeah, absolutely. So all our programs